Hi, this is Paul with the Oaken Knight, and welcome to part 2 of my series on Rally Round the Flag by Lost Battalion Games, released last year. And what we're doing is going to talk about some additions to the rules that I personally think need to be made. I think consensus was that the game needed some help upon release, and I certainly think this is a game that could become a real gem if it was just shined up a little bit. So let's give it a shot and see what we can do. Before we start, I'd just like to say that this is really, these are rule modifications of my own creation. I'm not really working with Lost Battalion Games at this point, although I did trade some email today with Jeff McCulloch, who is engaged in working on the rule books. He just released updates to the Division Command game, and as I understand, he's working on the Brigade Command game. Right now, I think we have some open field running to do here with the Corps Command game. I think we could do some good and make this game a lot of fun and get it on people's tables. So without dragging the intro up much more, if you want more information, look at part 1 of my series. Everything we do here, I would very much appreciate any comments you guys would like to make. I will read everything you say. All right, well, let's start by taking a look at the game map. Game map, of course, is of the Gettysburg battlefield. This is the Corps Command game, so it is the smallest map of the three. Although the map is pretty much identical, at least of the Division Command game. I do own that one, so I have seen it. I do not own the Brigade Command game, but such as it is. But this one is basically looks very much like all the others. What the things that maybe we need to cover for starters is it is a system built upon both area and point-to-point movement. So we see the movement along pikes is based on point-to-point movement to these circle thingies that are called march circles. And then we have areas. These are where the troops deploy when they're maneuvering around the field, not in column, and where they fight. And then we have edges. We have the boundaries of the areas. So what we have to understand is we have march circles, we have pikes, we have areas, and we have edges. Now, the game also has little different march areas along the edges of the map. And this is generally where the reinforcements come in, or at least in my view, where they should come in. So I'm going to define those as entry march circles. And if we look around the edge of the map, every single road, all around the map has that with a name. So the reinforcement schedule can go ahead and refer to the name. It's an easy convention. But there is one exception, and maybe the most important entry area on the map doesn't have one for reasons I don't know. So rule modification number 1 is going to be that there's a virtual march circle just off the map so that we can handle this area, the Chambersburg Pipe, just the same as any other entry point on the map. We don't want special cases for things like that. The second thing that's noteworthy is that we have little numbers. These are not defined as anything by the rule book, but I'm going to define them as terrain density ratings. So the Harris Ridge has a TDR of 1. Now that number is used in the rule book to determine which battle boards you use. But in our world, since we're changing things, it's going to do that, but it's also going to be a defensive rating for fire combat. So we can use this to have terrain that has more stuff in it to make it harder to shoot guys. And I think that's an appropriate thing to do. The U.S. flag is simply a control flag, and we have all kind of other flags that we can use during the game to change that. Again, it's things that I'm not going to change in our version of the rules. I'm not going to put much emphasis on. You can read the rule book. You guys are fully capable of doing that, I'm sure. All right, so we have the terrain density rating, and we have entry march circles, okay? So that in the rule book, when we're talking about entering guys, we can go ahead and cite that and build whatever special rules we need around that by defining it as something. You can see that there are 9 turns in the game. Here's day 1, day 2, day 3, morning, afternoon, evening. And just to be clear, this handout that is in the game, it shows a night turn. There really is no such thing in the current rule book, and I don't see any driving need to create something. So this, you can just set aside. You're not going to use it. The box also includes two nice placards for showing victory points, which are marked, which is not even in the rule book, but it's marked with these things. These are simply victory point tally markers showing how many points you have. The points that you receive are right on the march circles. You only get points for the march circles, and it has nice big happy numbers. Easy to read, easy to tally up. March circles can be controlled by one side or the other, or they can be neutral. And I recommend using these guys because here's CSA controlled points, here's USA controlled points, and here are contested or neutral points. So that's straight out of the rule book, but unlike these things that have no contested possibility, this you can keep track of everything. It's printed on the map. That's what you want to use. The actual units on the board are division level. Again, this is the Corps Command level system, and so the actual maneuvering pieces are pretty much at the division level as well as artillery brigade. Now, the red 6 you see is the fire rating, and the green 9 is the military discipline rating. The happy white dots, those are where you mark casualties with a dry erase marker that are included in the game. So there's no side paperwork for this. You just put it right on the base, and they also provide some Q-tips to let you wipe that off, and I can tell you from experience that it's very easy to do. So it seems a little odd maybe, I've never seen that, never seen Q-tips before included in a war game, but hey, it works, it's okay. This particular unit is the 1st Division of the 1st Corps, Army Potomac, so the Iron Brigade is embedded in this unit. Now, if you listen to my part 1 of this series, you see I had some issues with the fire rating where it takes a high number to hit, so you need to roll a 6 or more to hit, whereas you need a low number to pass morale, in this case a 9 or less to pass morale. It introduces some oddities as far as how the rule book deals with things. Now, you can do what you want. I prefer to just have die roll modifiers, and so I've structured everything around the idea that all the pluses and all the minuses are die roll modifiers instead of things that are modifying the actual rating on the stand. So you could redo it yourself and make up your own charts and things, but this is what I'm going to do. It's a choice I made. Now, Rally Round the Flag is a card-driven game. So, of course, there's cards, and of course both sides have them. Don't want to go through all the details of card use because, frankly, that's in the rule book. But I do want to show you at least one on this particular card and all cards like it. I propose a change. You notice along the left-hand side it's got a unit identified, a specific unit, Hood's Division from the Confederate 1st Corps. What we're going to do is that whenever Hood's Division is on the battle board and this card is a formation marker, we're going to go ahead and give Hood's Division +2 for all fire rating purposes, So he will get an offensive fire, he will get a benefit, defensive fire, he'll get a benefit, as well as melee. Presently, I'm not using this for military discipline checks at this point. It's probably a play test issue, but right now I'm using this for shooting and meleeing, and it gives you some more tactics to think about when you are choosing which cards to discount, which cards to keep, which card to play. Where do you expect to do your attacking? Oh, this is Hood's card, and I expect to be hitting the Yankees with the 1st Corps. Maybe about to hang on to this one instead of use it for some other attack somewhere else, or even to discard it. So more to think about. Key unit modifier will be based on this matching up with the unit on the battle board. This card has to be used as the formation card. That would be the first card that's played in order to have that effect. I really don't like to read rulebooks to people in my videos. However, since the focus of this particular video is rules, I think it's going to be hard to get away from some measure of that. So I think what I want to do is to page through the rulebook and to go through what we see, how to interpret it, and what changes that I propose to make. Now, we've already touched on the map and march circles and so forth, aside from adding the definition of entry march circles and the terrain density rating. I think we've handled the map reasonably well at this point. Next. Okay, battle boards. As I mentioned, the terrain density rating is used to pick the battle board you're using. That's unchanged. I talked a little bit of cards. We'll talk about more about those in a second. Hand capacity, unchanged. It's the commanding general that determines the hand capacity. But what is not clear from the game as provided is, what do you do at the start of the scenario? What do you do on turn 0 when you're setting everything up? What you need to do, the problem was that everybody's starting with an empty hand. That's not what you need to do. Each player needs to draw up to their hand limit before the game starts. You do that after the decks are all set up, but before you actually populate the deck with cards that are supposed to be in specific position. For example, if you have a scenario where the card is supposed to be on top of the deck, let's say it is the Confederate Second Corps, supposed to be card 1, and it's the first turn of the scenario that you're doing. Well, you need to not put that on the top of the deck. You need to draw however many cards are appropriate. So if Lee's in command, you'll need to draw 11 cards, and then you put the card at the top of the deck, or then you put the cards in whatever position they're supposed to be in, so that the prescriptions of the scenario remain in effect, even though you have to repopulate your hand at the beginning of the game. You only populate your hand like that at the very beginning of the game. You do not draw to fill your hand each and every turn. The game contains command cards with all the various corps and army commanders that were present at the battle. Each card will give you 2 alternatives for bonus that you get. So in this case, the first corps gets March 7 or Plan 4. Marching is what it says. It's marching. It's doing that point-to-point movement along the road. So units with that are with Longstreet can go ahead and actually can move 7 march circles down whatever road they choose to go. They can also expend one of those points and leave the road and deploy the troops into the field. Plan 4 is basically moving 4 units to do an area movement, and that can conclude attacking. It is an activation of 4 units under Longstreet's command. They have to be in his command to be able to do this. And the same thing with the others. They have to be in that corps in order to benefit from the card. Army command is a little different. You can draw up to your full hand limit, which for Lee's case is 11. Or you can do a Plan 4. So for Lee, you're going to be doing a whole lot more drawing cards up to your hand limit than diddling around with moving 4 units, but you do have the option should you so choose. Command cards are played in step 5 of the turn sequence, and after you do the bonus move that is an activation, it tells you need to go to step 2 and start going through an activation, a normal activation at step 2. This is extremely useful for doing things like marching the 11th Corps on the map, the 11th Union Corps on the map, and getting it over to Gettysburg and getting it deployed, because you can do it with a single card. They can go all the way from the map edge to being deployed west of Gettysburg or whatever direction it is to go ahead and be set up to meet Confederate Second Corps that's just about to enter the map. It's important to note that whenever you do a draw action with these or any other cards, the hand limit, the hand capacity, still applies. You can't go over that. That's going to be determined by your commanding general, which may or may not be your army commander, depending on how early you are in the scenario. We're going to skip this page. I think it's pretty much saying what it needs to say. Battle cards. These, I discussed this, the key unit benefit. They're on every card that's a regular attack battle sort of card has that. We're going to use that for that +2 benefit on any kind of shooting or melee. The rest of it, I think, is self-evident, with the one exception being tactics. As far as I know, this is the only place where the tactic ability is discussed, and so it's so easy to miss, I thought I would point it out. Event cards are drawn from the deck. They're mixed into the deck like any others. Some of them are mandatory immediately play, where when you see the mini ball on the reverse side, that's telling you got to use it right now. If it doesn't have that, you can retain it in your hand. And in fact, playing events has a special phase. It's phase 1 of the turn sequence. So unless it says immediate play, then you retain it in your hand and you have the option of using it in step 1 of the next time. The next time it's your turn. If it does have the mini ball on it, you need to do it right now. And since drawing cards happens after step 1, the execution of these guys will happen whenever you pick up the card. It could be a command card that has a draw ability on it, or it could be, I think, step 2, where the activated leader fills out his hand or gets to draw up to his limit. And you could have an event card that has immediate effect. You have to do it then. All right, let's talk about the events. Reserves arrive is pretty easy. I think it's reasonably documented. Basically, when you pick that card, you have a stack of cards that you're keeping on the side called reserve cards, and here's the Union ones. Okay, you have a small deck of cards. Whenever you pick this card, you use it right away. It's one of those immediate cards, and then you pick this from the decks. And both the reserves arrive card and the reserve card go in the discard pile. Night March, very important. Whenever either player picks this card, no further combat or area movement is allowed. The only thing you can do is march along the road. So you don't know when combat operations are going to stop exactly once you get to the evening turn. As I said, there is no night turn. What they kind of do is mix it in with the evening turn, and this is how they do it. Rain turn, optional rule. There was a chance of rain during the Battle of Gettysburg. It's not historical. Use it if you want to. Cavalry Corps skirmish, that's allowing certain cavalry units to come on the map late in the game. I consider this to be optional, and if you get that far in the game, I don't know if you really need this. I think you're more worried about doing Pickett's charge than what the cavalry's doing, but it's there if you want it. Heroic Charge, really cool card. When you play that in a battle sequence, it stops the other guy from playing any more cards, plus you get to play 2 additional cards. That's straight out of the rule book. What it can do is it can give you lots of bonus modifiers and keeps your opponent from bringing in more of his own. What I propose to do with this card is that every time there's a melee, it's possible to have 2 rounds. On the first round, the guy who moved into the area is the attacker. The second one, if there's still guys there, the original defender becomes the attacker. I'm proposing a change where you allow the defender to play this card and to put down 2 other cards when the initiative shifts in the second phase of melee. And when you play this card, be sure to yell at the top of your lungs, "Bayonets!" And you know what I mean. Battle Plan, cool card, nicely documented. The only thing I'd say is that you should, when you play the card, this will be in step 1 of the turn sequence, declare the extra general that you get to activate. That's what it does. It lets you activate 2 generals. So you declare who's being activated, then you completely execute the first general and all his troops and all the attacks, and then you go right back up to step 2 of the turn sequence and execute the second one. That way I think you'll be able to keep everything straight pretty easy. Command changes. The only thing I really changed there is to limit the effects of this to the first day. What I propose to do with this is actually the advanced rule is very good. If Reynolds isn't shot, there's no need for a command change. So until Reynolds is shot, then the command change card isn't even placed in the Union deck. If Reynolds is shot, then the command will devolve to another general if there's one available. There's rules about Hancock taking over turn 2. He will take over immediately. He doesn't have to wait for a command change card. The whole reason why he's over there is to take over command if necessary. But after that, after Reynolds is down, then you put the command changes in the deck for all subsequent turns until Meade arrives. Supplies arrive. Let's talk about supplies arrive. This card has got real problems. The I think there were earlier editions of this game that must have included morale routing. Now there is routing in this game, but that happens only on the battle board. And when it happens, if the whatever side loses the battle, everybody routes. They go to an adjacent area, and then they immediately rally. The effect of this card is to rally guys on the main map. Well, you never need to rally guys on the main map because everybody always automatically rallies. And the advanced version of this card, the advanced rule for this card is that you get back casualties, as I mentioned in my other video, and I think it's too powerful. I think it imbalances the game. And besides that, I don't see why you get back potentially nine steps of troops, which that's the equivalent of about a corps and a half of Union infantry. I don't see why you would get back that many guys just because apples arrived or whatever it is. So later on I'm going to propose a different change that will get some guys back, but not this card. I'd say take it out of the deck, don't use it. General Forward is an interesting card. It's intended to make some of the goofy moves that General Sickles did happen on the game map. In my opinion, they included it in too many turns in the scenario book. This card is a potential game breaker. It needs to be limited, although it could be fun. So what I'm proposing is that it's only used on the morning and afternoon turns of day 2. If it is played, it's an immediate play card, so if you pick it, you got to play it. But I would say that we simply want to force the Union to move towards the peach orchard with the nearest corps as determined by the nearest stand. If it's equidistance, the Union player gets to pick which corps it is. They immediately get free activation, and they must make a move towards the peach orchard. If they don't make it to the peach orchard, then they have to use the standard activation for the turn to activate that leader to try again. However, that being said, they're not under any obligation to initiate combat, and if they can't get closer to the peach orchard without initiating combat, the card is nullified. They don't have to do anything. If they make it to the peach orchard, they have to remain there for the rest of the current turn as well as one additional turn, or until they are attacked in order to be released for free movement. So this might be a fun thing. I think, again, I don't want it to break a game that's being competitive. I think as it is, they have this card coming on the first day. I think, good God, their Union has enough trouble on the first day. They don't need this, but perhaps it could be fun on the second day. Use it at your discretion. But again, I would limit it to actually forcing movement towards the peach orchard and call it a day. Here they're defining stands and generals and the general's ability. The only thing I really I did mention two things. One thing I want to mention is, here it says heroism is increased by +1 for each time the commander gets killed. I don't know why guys would become more motivated when their senior commanders are getting shot. This should be a -1. It should decrease heroism, not increase it. So the first time a general gets killed, one of his senior division commanders takes over, so Reynolds get killed. Doubleday is taking over. Doubleday isn't as good. He's not going to get better. It's going to be a -1 off of the heroism printed on the counter. It's going to be a 0. It's going to be a 0, as well as all the others are going to be decreased as well. And if it happens a second time, it gets decreased again. Note is, I don't know why it would ever be decreased a second time, because why should you put a 0 leader out there where he could get shot? He's not doing any good anyway. Just me. Heroism was something that I stressed as an issue, simply for consistency's sake. I think the game needs to either decide that you're modifying abilities or you're modifying die rolls, not both. If we look under military discipline, it talks about heroism modifying the military discipline rating that's on the counter, so on the stand. So in this case, it's a 9. If it's a +1, it would be a 10. Okay, fine. But if you're modifying die rolls for firing, and here it says modify die rolls, I would prefer to stick to modifying die rolls. So what you have to do to make it work, because big is routing, you need to turn you just need to change the sign whenever you do military discipline checks. Instead of a +1, it's a -1. For me, it works. Shoot big, route big. Remember that. You'll know what to do with the pluses and the minuses. Military discipline, I think it's all kind of self-explained except for getting the sign right. Fire combat, it's reasonably well explained. Later on, we're going to be adding cards. When the formation card and all the other cards, and remember the key unit modifier. If your formation card matches what the unit is when he's shooting, he gets a +2 or +2 in melee. So the first division here could become awesome sauce if it's got the first division, first corps card as the formation card. A tough division is going to be even tougher. And of course, every single division in the game has a card, so it brings a nice tactical sort of set of options to you. Troop strength, it just stands. I think you could use pipe cleaners, or if you don't like the dry erase markers. I've tried the erase markers. I think they work okay. I'm going to stick with the dry erase markers, but like I would do in a standard miniatures game where there's troops all over the place, I think pipe cleaners would work just fine as well. Turn record track. Now, there's some changes that I want to make here. Here we say that the turn ends when either player has activated all their generals and has chosen to pass. Okay, turn ends when either player has activated all their generals and has chosen to pass. Oh boy, this one threw me for a loop like I can't tell you. Guys, this sounds just like every general's supposed to get one activation. It ain't so. It ain't so. The way this game needs to be played is that a general can be activated as long as you got cards. You do it that way, the game is going to work. And it's also going to be a much more satisfying game, because if you're talking about a 9-turn game, and you only can activate, say, the initial guys on the board 9 times during the game, that's not fun. That'd be a very fast game. And I also, just from playing it, I don't think it would work. What I've been doing is that you can activate a general as many times as you want to as you go through the turn. And the limiting factor is actually the cards you have in your hand. So as long as you have cards in your hand, you can keep activating. Now, what you need to do is have at the step 2, when you're activating the general in the turn sequence, the general can dump and draw. He can take cards out of his hand, discard them, and then he can draw up to his draw limit. Okay, that's fine. What you need to do is require that the general draw at least one card, even if he has to discard one. And in that way, you're going to force at least some activity. There will be a time limit for the game. If the guy is consuming at least one card a turn, at least there'll be an end to the turn. In reality, as soon as there's battles, you're going to be using cards faster. So I don't see that as a consideration. But there are times when you want to conserve your cards, and there are times when you want to blow through your cards. And so being able to activate multiple times is essential, either way, because in theory you could activate a general and just have one attack and use just one card for a round. Whereas, let's say, the Union may try to dump cards faster so that they can get to certain core activations that are buried in the deck. But this in my world is just wrong. And if you look at the YouTube videos that are out there as far as the game as it existed in Kickstarter, it was played exactly as I'm describing. Units were getting multiple activations per turn. I think that's the way the game was designed. I don't know where this came from. The turn ends when either player has activated all their generals. No, sir. The game ends when you have consumed all your cards. And has chosen to pass. Well, boy, that drove me crazy too. There's no passing here. You cannot. Neither side can pass to end a turn, and I'll tell you why. It's like if you allow passing to end a turn, you'll have some smart Army of the Potomac player passing all the time on day one. The Southerners are driving the action. They should not have the Union ending turns by passing. Just like it says, when turn ends, the other side gets one more activation, and that's it. That's going to happen when they have no further cards to draw, and they're required to draw a card. So again, I'm requiring you to draw at least one card. If you have an empty deck and you have to draw and there are no cards, then you announce turn end. The other guy has one more impulse to play. He can do one more activation, and that's the end of the turn. In a sense, if you're familiar with Mage Knight, it's kind of like that. Action point track, I use this for all kind of stuff, for keeping track of modifiers in combat and all that. So this is just a handy chart to use. Step losses, dry erase marker, victory attack. I think we're all good on that. All right, here is the main sequence of play. As I mentioned, the main change, the only change in setup that outside of some tuning of the scenario book, is you got to let people draw up to their hand limit on turn 0. At the start of the game, everybody has a full hand, but at the same time, if there's cards needed to be seated into specific positions, that happens after you've drawn the cards, so that the cards are actually in those positions when play actually starts. Okay, turn record, or turn sequence. Resolve events. Remember I said events can be immediate events that have the mini balls on them and ones that don't. The ones that are immediate, you play as soon as you draw them. So they will actually happen here, or say, well, they'll probably happen here, where the generals are drawing up cards into their hand. All the other events happen here. So if you drew a non-mandatory event here, a discretional event, the soonest you'd play it is you'd go all the way around, and it's the next time you got to phase 1, which would be after the other guy gets to do his turn. That's when you get to play the card. All right, activating generals. Set action points marker equal to the leadership rating of the general. Okay, fine. All right, here's Reynolds. Okay, you see that kind of whitish 7? That is what they're talking about. You will set the action points to 7. 3 is his draw limit. So if he's the active guy, he will get to draw 3 cards, but not to exceed the hand limit. Prior to drawing, he can discard cards, but in no event can he have more than the hand limit of the commanding general. Not his. If he's not the commanding general, he's not the one who's limiting the hand. It's whoever the commanding general is. If Reynolds is the commanding general, that 7 also doubles as the hand limit. It's also the number that's used to roll for casualties. So if he is in a battle board column that gets wiped out, he's got to roll 2d6, and you can see 7 wounds him. It takes him off the map. So that's why Reynolds is a little bit brittle, because he's killed on a 3 and wounded on a 7. Either way, he's out of the game. And that gets Reynolds out of the way, and we have to play the command rules that we talked a little bit about. All right. Again, we now know that generals are not limited in their activations in the entire turn, so we're not worried about that. We set the action marker to the leadership rating of the general, discard a number of cards. Okay, remember it said you can dump cards, and then he draws up to his hand limit. So when we get to step 2, you're going to say, okay, I'm going to activate Reynolds. Great. So what am I going to do? I'm going to dump cards. I'm going to look at my hand and say if I have 6 cards in my hand, and let's say Reynolds is the commanding general, so the hand limit is 7. So he could draw 1 card, or he could discard 2 cards of his choice and then draw 3 cards. Now, unlike where it says later in here where they describe the draw ability on the command cards, they say you draw and then dump. I'm saying let's be consistent here. This says dump and draw, and even on the command cards that have a draw ability, or any card that has a draw ability, we dump then draw. So if you're going to get over your hand limit, you got to discard first, and then you pick across the board. Consistency is a good thing. All right, so the leader's been activated. He's adjusted his hand. He's got his fresh cards in there, and now the general can go up to 2 areas on the map. That can be a march circle move, or it could be just an area-to-area move. So it could be to move. It could be moving 1, 2 along the march circles, or it could be or it could be, there he is, da, 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 1, 2, along the areas. When he's moving along the march circles, any troops with him are going to stay with him. They're going to stay with him. So in that way, we can move lots of troops on pikes without paying a lot of action points, without paying any action points at all. This is basically not counting against any action points. It's free. The other thing we can do is we can march. Let's say that Reynolds had the Iron Brigade Division. Let's say that Reynolds had the Iron Brigade Division with him. It's off map, but we know it's there. Let's say he can move 1, and then he can deploy this into an area. He can deploy it into any adjacent area that's next to the march circle. So instead of moving 2, he can move 1 and then deploy all his troops. And you will be doing that. Think of like the 11th Corps marching on, and then they need to fan out their troops as quickly as you can. All right. So let's say it's the Confederate player's turn. And so we start at step 1 of the turn sequence, and we see it's resolve events. Any events in his hand, he gets to play. And those will not be mandatory events because he will already have played those. You play those when you get them. So resolve events, you can play events, I don't know, like battle plan. Say, there's the one. He can hold this one in his hand and play battle plan at a time of his choosing. Okay, this would allow him to activate 2 generals, remember? And once you declare the 2 active generals, then you fully execute one, and then you fully execute the other. All right, so that's step 1, and resolve events, activate the general. Okay, we are activating 3rd Corps. Here's the 3rd Corps commander. He can apply to anybody when he's in a march circle, apply to any area that's adjacent, any troops that are with him in the march circle, although combat never happens in a march circle, never happens there. Likewise, since we have Reynolds in a march circle, his leadership will extend to the 1st Division, 1st Corps that's in an adjacent area. All right, so the rule says that the 3rd Corps commander, where he's active, this would be A.P. Hill, can go ahead and move 2 areas. And earlier in the rule book, it talks about moving into march circles that are adjacent to enemy units and how you automatically route out of those. So we're not doing that. What we are doing, let's say he has 6. He's a 6-point guy. He has 6 activation points. He's not going to use any of those free moves. What he's going to do is use action points to move his guys. Since he's adjacent to these guys and he's in an adjacent march circle, it will cost 1 point. Anything else? Like here, this is actually not touching the march circle that he's in. So to move this guy, it's actually range 2. So it's going to be 2 action points to move this guy, boink, let's say he goes there, and 1 to move Anderson. So Anderson can actually go in here. Now, this is how combat happens, right? You have guys in adjacent, 2 sides occupying the same area. The issue is, under these rules, what do you do with A.P. Hill? Is he going to benefit Anderson or not? It's not clear in the rule book. I would kind of say no, because he is not with them and he's not in that march circle, which is adjacent to the area that the attack's happening. I think that's kind of not right. So, rule change. Anytime there's activated troops in combat, the general can affect any and all of them. He can move up, and he will declare himself as being in one of the areas, but he will affect all combat. So if there was, say, a Union unit here, then you have the 1st Brigade of Heath. He would be in here. A.P. Hill would affect that combat. Likewise, A.P. Hill is going to affect this. As long as they're active, to keep things simple and to keep this sensible, A.P. Hill will affect all the guys that he activated, because he's got a staff, he's not there by himself. He can do more than one thing at once. Now we go on to step 4, and it's saying we can shoot with our guys. Now that's for guys that have not already moved. So when these guys go up here, they're not shooting at each other because they didn't start there. Okay, so these guys have done their thing, and they're not going to be shooting here. They will get a chance to shoot in the battle, so we don't need to have them shooting again here in step 4. However, let's say that Anderson moved up there and didn't, and a battle was not declared. They're ending in the same area. They can be shooting at each other in step 4 of the turn sequence. Likewise, step 4 of the turn sequence is when ranged artillery fire happens. Main rule change that I think you need to deal with is that this terrain density modifier will be included. Will be included in that shot. And the rules as written, they talk about the range of the target, and we're going to introduce the terrain defense modifier as a modifier to ranged artillery. It's not easy to hit with ranged artillery, as it was not very effective at the battle, and it's not going to be that effective here either. Much better is to move the artillery up and to get up close and personal. That is effective. Now, step 5. And all it's saying is that you used up all your action points one after the other to do actions. So since moving the units up and shooting them all happens in step 4, you can't do both. That's why you can't move up and shoot, but rest assured shooting will happen in the battle that follows. Step 5 says keep you spending all your action points, and when you're done, then return to step 2 if you can play a command card. This is where command cards are played, so that if you have more leaders that you can activate, and you choose to do so with the command cards that you're holding in your hand. So let's say we had the 2nd Corps command card. We could play it here and get the bonuses on the card, which is going to be planning and marching, and then we could actually do an activation for the 2nd Corps as we normally would. Going back to step 2, that means we're going to get to draw more cards and do all the normal stuff that we do. Okay. Now, one of the things that happens before you get that far is that the general is also called the general in command, not to be confused with the commanding general. Those are two different things. The general in command is simply the guy who's in charge of this activation, and he's the guy who gets to decide if battles happen. For clarity and simplicity, I'm telling you battles will happen anytime an activated troop goes into an area with opposing troops at the discretion of the owning player. So we don't have to have this battle. We could choose to defer it and just kind of take more dulcery shots at each other. Or we could go in and say we want to do the full battle sequence, and let's say if there were Union troops here, you could do it there too. Each battle will be completely separate from one another. But this is instead of making this hard as far as figuring out when a general can declare a battle, if he's activated troops and they're in there with enemy units, they can have a battle. The general will also influence tactically with his plus modifier any battle that's initiated that has troops that he just activated, and that's how we'll do it. And it's a simpler way to do it. It's clear, it's fast, it's easy. That's what we're going to do. And that would be step 6 of the turn sequence. They declare the battles. Then it's simply the opponent takes their turn, and then we keep doing that until the end of turn. The end of turn condition is met, which I'm telling you is when one of the players needs to draw a card and there aren't enough cards. A player, if he has 3 vacancies in his hand, he has to try to fill it. Okay. The other thing is that you have to, if you're not up to your command limit, you have to try to draw to your command limit, and if you can't do it, that triggers the end of turn sequence as well. So if you've got 3 slots open in your hand, if say you got Lee, his capacity is 11, you have 8 cards in your hand, you have to be able to draw 3 or the end of turn condition will be met. The player can go ahead and do his activation, but the other side is going to get to do his, and that's it. The end of turn condition has been met. All right, here's the turn sequence again. Here's what I just talked about starting the battles. The other guy gets his turn, end of turn sequence, all good. In the activation text, they talk about generals declaring their battles. I'm just saying if the general activated the troops, he gets to declare a battle there if bad guys are with him. As far as the other stuff, cavalry charging and reaction. I haven't actually used it that much because, frankly, Gettysburg is not a cavalry-heavy game, except for the beginning, and you're so defensive, you're not going to be worried about Buford charging. So I haven't done anything with this, and maybe there doesn't need to be anything done with this. Musketry, that's shooting in the turn sequence. It's shooting in the turn sequence. So here it says the bombard by artillery, move cavalry, move an infantry stand. Where is it? Musketry. Musketry by infantry. That's different than small arms fire in the battle. So there's no cards used for this. So in my view, since there's no cards played for this, there's no bonuses for this except leadership. This is more of a skirmishing situation where you might get a hit, but really it's lower level than the full-blown battle sequence, which you can end up having quite a few bonuses while you do it. I don't think we need to do any more there. Battles. Okay. First thing you need to do is to get a battle board. All right, that is the terrain density rating on the map. So here, that would be a terrain density modifier 0. So we would get the 0 map. That's a 1. We'd use map number 1. Those would also be modifiers for shooting. Okay. Here we go. First thing, the attacker deploys in marching columns. That's simply you're putting your guys on the battle board. Now, let us say that we had this situation at the beginning of the turn. We play our events. That's fine. We activate AP Hill. He has 6 action points right there. He chooses to use one of those action points because he's considered to be at range 1. Here's the range circle. Or excuse me, the march circle, and here's the area. It's adjacent, they're touching. It's going to only cost 1 point, so we pay the 1 point, and Anderson marches forward. Okay? Now, Anderson marching forward is in step 4 of the sequence, so we can only do one thing in there. Shooting is one of the things that's in step 4. He chose to march. That's all you get. In step 6, AP Hill gets to designate battles. Well, since what we're saying is that since Anderson was active, that's all that's necessary for AP Hill to say that's a battle area. Boom, we put down the battle marker. Okay, that's fine. Now, we're also saying that AP Hill can relocate to any place there's a battle. If he had 3 of them going on, he'd get to choose. Let's say we do want to do that. He can actually go and bump in over there. Okay, so he's with them. Regardless, since he did activate them, his modifier will apply to any and all of them. All right. Now, first step of this phase of the battle phase is to put the battle marker down. So if you're like me, an old guy, you forget things. So I don't want to forget where these guys belong. But we're going to go over to the battle board, which is a 0 board because the terrain density on that particular area, let's see, is a 0. Right there, it's a 0. That's a 0. This is the board we use. So now we set the guys up in their column. All good. All right, so we deployed the defender. That's the first step of the battle sequence. The attacker's deployed. The attacker chooses the column for the battle that he wants to execute. So the defender, if there was more than one defender, this is a 3-column zone. The more open the terrain, the more columns you can have. So this is level 0, so we can have all 3 columns active. If we were in level 3 terrain, which is only the city of Gettysburg, you'd only have 1 column. So basically, more open terrain means more columns, means more opportunity for doing tactical maneuvers on the battle board. We'll get to that in a minute. Step 4 of the battle sequence is to play a formation card. So each column, when they set up their battle, they get to play one and only one formation card at this point. So this is what we have. We see that the 1st Division of the 1st Corps has selected a line formation, and that the that Anderson from the Confederate Third Corps has selected a skirmish formation. We see that the conditional modifiers for the Union would be effective against assaults, which this is not, and the Confederate card would be effective against skirmishing, which this is not. So none of that applies. Since the Union is on defense in the first melee round, they get the one modifier, and there's no attack modifier here on this for the Confederates on the skirmish side. The other thing to note is that the Union has played the card for the 1st Division of the 1st Corps as the key unit, and we see that we actually do have the 1st Division of the 1st Corps. That means that for all shooting and for all melees, that division is going to get a +2 modifier. They are motivated. They got the match. This is the guy on the card. He's getting a +2. Whereas the Confederates, they've got the card for Johnson's division. Whereas it's in the it's the 2nd Corps. So it's not even the same corps. If it was the same corps, it wouldn't matter. Has to be the same division. Has to be the same guys. The names have to match up. So this is Anderson from the 3rd Corps. The card is for Johnson of the 2nd Corps. No match, no modifier. Step 3 is for artillery bombardment. Since we don't have artillery here, we don't have to worry about it. The +2 modifier for battle board artillery in the bombardment phase continues to be used. It's a good rule. However, you would also use the terrain modifier. Now, this particular battle board is a 0. This is a new addition, so this isn't in the book that you have. If this was, say, level 2 terrain like Cemetery Hill, that would be a 2 to the benefit of the defender for bombardment and shooting. Okay, this does not apply to melees because, well, you're so close it doesn't matter. But for shooting, you get cover, and that's what this would be. This is what this would do for you. All right, so we have no artillery. Next would be defender volley. So let's tally up the modifiers for the defender. Okay, we have 1 on defense, and we will credit that for volleys. So he's defending. He gets a 1 modifier. He has the key unit, that's another +2. He has his leader, who is a +1 heroism. Remember heroism? There it is, +1. Okay? So that counts too. So we're up to +4. All right. Now we also get the number of stands in the target. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stands. So that is going to be that's going to be a negative modifier. This helps the defender, as would the terrain. So it's going to be a -5, okay? -5 with the +4 is going to be a net -1 to the die roll. So what I like to do, I like to keep track of my pluses and minuses here. Since we're done using these action points, if there's any left over, they won't matter anymore. So what I would take a Union chit, and I would tally up. I would say, okay, we've got our defense on the card is a 1. So I'd move this to action point, or to a 1 modifier. We have a key unit, that's 2 more. Dunk dunk. We have a general, who's a +1. And we have no terrain mods helping anybody, so that's it for the benefits. For the benefits for the Southerners, we got a 5-point stand. And I'm going to include the leader. Leaders help keep guys together. I see no reason not to use it. All right. There's no other benefits on the cards. There's no re-rolls. There's nothing that would change the dice rolls. And so we see that we have 4 points helping the North, 6 for the South. So we see that the net modifier is going to be -2. All right. So what do we do with that -2? We look at the fire rating of the guy who's shooting. Okay, so we need a 6 to hit, which means modified by -2 to the die, not the number on the stand. So that means we get -2 means we're going to need to have an 8 to hit. We're going to need an 8 to hit. So I'm just going to roll dice and just see. Okay, I rolled a 6. Minus 2 is a 4. That would be a miss. So we can leave that as that. It's a miss. We do the exact same procedure for the Southerners shooting. So let's just assume that, well, let's just go through it. Why not? Next step is attacker shooting. And so we have on the north, we have a three guys in their unit, so it's going to be 3 helping the defender. We have a leader. We have no terrain cover in terms of terrain density. We do have 1 point on defense of the card. We do have 2 points of key unit. On the attacking side, we have nothing helping us on the card. We have no key unit. We do have a +1 leader. We have 1. In this case, the Anderson is rolling at a -6 to get to a 6. So really, only boxcars will get him a hit under these circumstances. Not good, not happy. But again, he had no offense on his card. He had no key unit. So we've got Anderson going up against one of the toughest divisions in the Union Army, who's also been upgraded to key unit status. It's going to be tough, all right? Well, let's just say that's going to be a miss and move on. The volley's done. The bombardment is done. Now we're going to play battle cards, and let's just assume they pass. This is where they go back and forth. Both the sides go back and forth until one player passes or they run out of cards and the guy has to pass. You can read the rules. You can read the rule on that. Let's just say that no extra cards are played, and a lot of times there won't be. You know, because you only have so many cards in your hand. The Confederate might say, if he's attacking in the beginning, which he generally is, you know, he may be happy with the cards he has put down, whereas the other side may not be. Well, we don't want to give him the opportunity to play any more cards. All right, so let's just say there's no more cards, and we're on to the attacker must pass the ranks. Since there's only one rank of troops, this does not matter. If there was, then the leadership would count. You can use the modifier straight out of the book for that. The actual melee. And the melee is simply, it's a variant of the shooting. You basically count up the points on both sides, and they actually tally separate. So, for example, we have 3 Union troops in our stand. We have the leader doesn't count for points, but he will count for the +1. This is because he's a +1 leader. He's got a defensive card. He's got key unit status. There's never a terrain modifier for the melee. The Southerners have 5 points in their stand. They have a leader. They have no benefit from their card. So the South is rolling at a net -1. So we roll 2 dice for the North, 2 dice for the South, and see what the results are. Here's the dice we rolled, and we see that there's a deficit of 4 points between the rolls. And on our tracking of the cards and such, the Confederates also had an additional deficit of 1. So the total deficit is 5 points. The Confederate loses this melee. What happens? Well, the deficit does not equal or exceed twice the number of stands of the strongest unit. We had a 5-point deficit, and we have 5 guys on the stand. It would take 10 for it to double. So it's only going to cause 1 hit, and it will not necessarily cause a rout. And you can see we took our handy-dandy dry erase marker. Make sure you don't use a Sharpie, guys. You won't like what happens if you do. That we see we've marked the casualty. Now, the next step would be we have to go ahead and see what happens. He still could rout. So how are we going to figure the morale? All right. Well, we had a deficit of 5. All right. We have a leader. So we have a deficit of 5. So I'm going to go ahead and put the deficit there. We have leader. Oh, excuse me. Leader's making it better. So we have a deficit of 4. That's about it. There's other modifiers for having routed stands in the column and all that. We're not worrying about that right here. You can read that in the book. So it is a deficit of 4. So we have to roll. What are we rolling against? Remember, route big, shoot big, hit big, route big. Okay, so that is going to be a +4 to the die roll, trying to get to a 7. Oh, we've taken a hit. That's going to be another +1. We're going to go ahead and count hits against the guy too. So it's going to be a +5. Odds are he is not going to stick around and take this. We're going to roll the dice. I rolled a 6 plus another 5 is an 11, and we only had to get to an 8 to go away. These guys go away. Okay, these guys go away because the general's in that vacated column. The column is vacant. Here he is. He's got to roll to see if he's going to get killed or wounded. What we do? He's killed on a 3 and he's wounded on a 6. So we can pretend that he didn't get touched, and that's good. If he did, we would take the dry erase marker and mark one of the tombstones, then all his ratings get 1 worse. Remember, we changed what it says in the book about heroism. We're not going to make it an additional +1. We're going to make it worse. All right. And then at this point, we had our battle marker on the map. We would simply pick up the battle marker. We would have the defenders resume their position because they won. The attackers would get kicked back. The leader would follow them back, and that would be the end of this particular battle. So the Iron Brigade and its sister brigade won. All right. Just a couple other things before I wrap this session up. I think that the victory point, the victory conditions are generally okay. I would make, if one side has double the points as the other at the end of any day, that's a operational victory, and a tactical victory is that you end the game with more points. I'd simply add to the tactical victory that you also have to have no more casualties than the other side. And if you have more points based on the position on the map, but you've suffered more casualties, that would be a draw. I think casualties have to figure into this somewhere as well. The position on the battlefield is temporary, but dead guys are dead forever. So I think we need to include that too. So in order to get a tactical victory, you got to have more victory points based on the map position and have suffered no more casualties than the other side in order to actually have a tactical victory. Then the last thing, I think, entering. Okay. When units are entering the map via the scenario, typically they're going to require that you play the command card. So, for example, let's assume our good buddies in the 11th Corps are set to come in the map per the scenario. Now, the way this is going to work is that the 11th Corps card, if I remember right, is buried somewhere in the draw deck. So it's not necessarily going to come right away. When it does come, you're going to get this. So let's say you did a draw because you activated another general. Okay, you drew up to your hand limit, and lo and behold, this was one of the cards you got. Great. When do you play this card? Well, step 5 of the turn sequence is when you play command cards. So you would have activated all your guys, had your battles and stuff, and then you play this card. All right? What does it do? Well, March 5 is real simple and really good. What it means is you get to march 5 down the road. So 1, 2, 3, 4. If you want to go all the way here, fine. But what you could also do with that last point is deploy all your troops into the adjacent areas and be fully set up just by the play of this card. So that's how you can get guys in position when guys are entering the map. That's real important. It's real important for the 11th Corps. It's also later on in the first day, the 12th Corps. Usually you're on the ropes by the time the 12th Corps shows up. So you need to go ahead and get them efficiently where they need to be. Last game I trialed, the North was down to 3 stands. They had one from the 1st Corps, one from the 11th Corps, and they had Buford covering the key areas around Cemetery Hill. They were in copse of trees, Cemetery Hill, and Culp's Hill. That's it. That's all they had. Everything else got blown away, except that the Southerners had kind of exhausted themselves. They had used all their good attack cards. They didn't have any key unit cards that matched up with their units anymore. They didn't really have attack points on the cards. They were all kind of defensive cards. And so it was not necessarily a given that attack anywhere up the line would work. And plus, the Northern side had staged a forward defense. So they weren't exactly in position yet. They needed a turn to get there. They needed to get their cards straightened out and so on and so forth. And guess what? The 12th Corps arrived, and they were able to fill in over here to provide some kind of real resistance, okay, using exactly that technique that I just showed you. They used the march points to get to where they needed to be and then to fan out right away. The Southerners stormed Cemetery Hill, and they lost, They got beaten back. And then the night turn card played, and the 3rd Corps came into position. And guess what? The South was a much more tough position than it had been just earlier in the same turn. Before I wrap it up, I just want to touch on what I'm calling the night interface. There is not a night turn, but I do believe we need to have some way of bringing troops back into the game because, like I said, the entire 2nd Corps has 6 infantry strength points. So you can take 2 hits at one time if you lose a melee bad enough. That's pretty tough. And as I say, we're not going to use the supplies arrive card. That's just goofy. So instead, we're going to have a night interface where troops can go ahead and rest and reorganize and figure out who the new sergeant is and all of that kind of stuff, as well as maybe have some guys actually show up that had gotten lost or scared off. What we're going to do is allow 1/3 of the rounded down. We're going to allow 1/3 of the lost strength points for infantry to come back, and 1/2 of the lost artillery strength points to come back. Remember, each artillery unit only has 1. So we're allowing half the artillery rounded down to come back each night. And we don't care about the night of July 3rd. So there's 2 night interphases. And what I propose is that stands that have lost the most strength get priority. So they get to recover the first strength point. You cannot erase more than 1 hit during this phase from any one unit. Stands with 2 figures may be brought back to full strength. Other stands cannot. So they're small as a percentage. It's just, okay, 2-point guys can come back fully, but not other guys. And an eliminated stand may be brought back into the game after all the other possibilities have been exhausted. So we can actually get back guys that have been eliminated once we have done all we can do for everybody on the map. And if no one qualifies, then you just lose whatever extra points you have. So for example, I played a game where the Southerners had lost 6 points during the first day, and the North had lost 9 points. Now, because the Southerners had their hits all scattered around and they didn't have any that had been taken in two stand units, they only got 1 point back. So effectively they had lost 5. The Northerners, however, had hits all scattered around. They had lost 2-point units, and it turns out they were able to get back 3 points. So at the end of the night interface, the Southern losses came to 5, and the Northern losses came to 6. And in addition to that, I was able to bring back an artillery stand for I think probably the North. So there were artillery casualties. Remember when they in the battle board, if your side's routing out of the column and the artillery's there, they got to make their military discipline roll or they just die. That seems to be how most artillery dies. It's being in the wrong place at the wrong time and then not rolling well. All right. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one more video. I'm going to actually play some turns. I'm going to do it for real so you can see everything in action. I know if you hung with me this far, your eyes are probably crossing and you're saying, what is he talking about? Well, I'm going to do one more to actually show you what I'm talking about. So think of this as the theory session, and then we're going to give a practical session in the next episode. So until then, I wish you a good gaming, and please subscribe if you choose to. I would enjoy seeing my subscription numbers rise. At least it gives me something to shoot for. And with that, I'm going to wish you all a pleasant evening. This is Paul, the Oaken Knight. Take care.